this lesson, I'm going to speak to some of the foundation concepts of NLP. They are not all the foundation concepts, but they will give you a good idea of some of the fundamental, if you like, theories of NLP. To start with, I'd like to talk about the concept that at any one time, there are three things going on that come together as our way of being. And that all these three things are completely connected in a loop, as in they form a system. When you change one, the other two change. These three things are our internal process, which you might recognise as our thinking, our internal dialogue. When we see pictures in our head or hear our own voice in our head or remember something, this would all be considered internal process. The other thing is our state or mood or emotion, and even if we are in a neutral state, this still means there is some state present. The third one, physiology, our body, or when it's large enough and recognisable enough, we might describe seeing or hearing a behaviour in someone. So at any one time, someone may have an internal process, a thought, they may have an experience, a state, and this may be reflected in their physiology, which would be in the non-verbals of how they hold themselves, small movements, not just large movements such as behaviour. When we understand that all these things are connected and that when you change one, other things change, you can understand that whenever we're working to create change with someone, it is often reflected as an outcome in new behaviour. But we understand from NLP that by changing the internal process, this may be the easiest and fastest way to create change in state, mood, and physiology or behaviour. Much of what goes on in terms of our internal process, our state, mood, and our physiology is below our conscious awareness. So NLP has a concept of what is in conscious awareness, what we could notice and speak about, for example, and what is below conscious awareness. And we understand that the vast majority of what is occurring internally in us is completely below conscious awareness or unconscious. Our way of speaking about the unconscious is that simple. So what we're conscious of and what's below conscious awareness. We understand that there is a lot that's being taken in, processed. There's a lot of skill and resources. There's a lot of things that make sense of how we think and how we feel and behave that is below our conscious awareness. And in NLP, we look to work with that. We understand that there is a lot of richness and resource there, that if we can become conscious of it and connect with it and create change at that level, things change in terms of state, mood, and patterns of thinking and behaviour very much more easily and smoothly. This is the full model, which is actually about the process of making meaning and is called the structure of subjective experience. It reflects the work of a linguist called Concepts. And in this, Concepts said that we are making meaning about our external environment completely based on and dependent on our senses of sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell. That this is the basis, the channels through which we're interacting with the external environment or external reality. And that through these channels, all information is taken in and has to be filtered and go through a process of making meaning for us to construct an internal representation of the external reality. He said that about 2 million bits of information or data may be coming through our five senses, and that we are only able to be conscious of a lot less. Currently, the figure is 126 bits of information that we're able to hold in our conscious minds. And This information goes through a process which is founded in language, in the human capacity to make meaning and hold meaning and complexity through language. And in language, we do three main things. We generalize things. So if we see, for example, an animal, we will put it into a category such as dog or cat, and we will then be able to draw on a whole heap of meaning based on that generalization. We'll have expectations of it, and that's based on a generalization. We also distort things. For example, we may imagine that we see something or hear something, and we make a meaning of it. And our capacity for distortion is our imagination. So we recognize distortion. Probably the most obvious one is when you have an experience the same as someone else and they talk about it and they seem to exaggerate something or say that something was definitely the case, but you did not see or hear that yourself. So it's easy to pick up the distortions of others, but we are very much engaged in our own distortion. So it's very hard to see our own distortions. And of course, we also delete a lot. So 2 million bits of information, of which only 126 bits we can become conscious of, means that a massive amount is deleted. And one of the major ways in which we delete is through perceptual filters. And the perceptual filters that influence us are things such as, what do we believe to be true? So we understand in NLP that beliefs form a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, that if you have a belief of something to be true, that you will unconsciously seek to prove it. So there will be a filter that deletes things that contradict your belief, but focus on things that reinforce it, that seem to provide evidence for it. So beliefs are incredibly important factors in creating our internal meaning of something, in that they can create two extremely different meanings in two different people who have two different fundamental beliefs. And this explains a lot why communication and working together and living together in society can be so complex, when you realize that we're completely capable of having a different understanding of the external reality based on our own process of making meaning, our own internal beliefs, values, the experiences throughout our whole lifetime coming together to create perceptual filters that filter out, delete some things, distort other things, and categorize other things to create a meaning that is unique to ourselves. This theory, the structure of subjective experience, is the basis of the statement which you may hear a bit around NLP, which is that the map is not the territory, meaning our internal representation is only a representation. We don't really know what the external reality is. If we were a cat and we could see ultraviolet light like cats can, we would have a map of the territory that included information about what other cats pass through this space, and we'd be able to see that we'd not be able to see that as a kind of glowing blue light, and we'd also be able to smell it in a way that we can't as human beings, because we are dependent on the hardware, if you like, of what we can see and smell, and this creates our own understanding of reality. The colours we see as human beings are different to what other animals see. People who are colourblind will not see something as red the way other people will see it. And so how do we know what is actually the truth about the external environment? It's all based on the hardware of our biology influencing the data that is taken into our brain, and then the perception that is created based on that. And this is what is meant by the map is not the territory. It's nothing more than a representation of what is outside of us that helps us navigate our world. And the fact that we all have different maps explains why we navigate the territory so differently. For coaches, understanding that the map is not the territory helps us understand also that everything is just maps, including our own. that there is no one truth. There are just truths or understandings that have different results in the world, that give us different outcomes. So it allows us to work with clients who have quite different maps of reality to ourselves, and to know that we need to work cleanly to respect that is their map, the meaning they make, that if that changes, it is through their choice, and because that map is not giving them the outcomes that they want. Another core concept is the logical levels of change by Robert Dilts. And Robert Dilts is still a major theorist and prolific author in the field of NLP, and came up with this beautiful model talking about what happens when people are looking to change. So Dilts said that all change, the lowest level of change, can exist in the level of context. So even if someone comes in and says they want to create a change in behaviour, as an NLP coach, I would ask, in what context do you want that change in behaviour? If it's their communication style, is it just the context of certain people in the workplace, or is it in their relationship? So context and being very context specific when it comes to change is really important, because according to this theory, we have a lot of resources, different beliefs, values, and more that are quite context specific. So if you have noticed that you can be quite different in different contexts, if you've ever gone on a working holiday and discovered that your behaviour changes, and you might feel more free to be yourself in some way, then you're experiencing what happens when you change context, what happens further up the logical levels. So the lowest level of change is the context. An example of that would be when you create a change in where you live, or a change in just how your environment looks, and you experience a change. So, really common one would be, for example, doing a big spring clean or big cleaning exercise as a result of breaking up with someone, or wanting to create a big change in your life. Another would be, for example, from my experience in the workplace, when one weekend everybody had to pack up their desk into boxes, and there was going to be some kind of change in the open plan office while we were away for the weekend, and we came back in and nothing else had changed except there were new dividing barriers between the desks, and they were just a little bit smaller or shorter than the previous week. And it seemed to me like a massive effort for everyone to have packed up and unpacked just to install these new barriers. And then what happened was a new behaviour emerged. We were able to see the person on the other side of the barrier and talk to them, and we had more relationship. So I really liked that change. This change in context enabled a new behaviour. So change in context can be the lowest level of change, and it is a real change. Then the next level of change would be an actual change of behaviour. And by behaviour we mean something that someone else could see or hear you do from the outside. So many things that people want to create as changes in coaching do come down to being able to do something differently. Even if they want to create a big goal or reach a dream, it's often the need to do some certain behaviours that are challenging in that people need help with. So understanding that behaviour is a level at which you'll always be talking about in coaching is really important. Grounding the change in what does it mean by what, in terms of what you're actually going to do, is fundamental to coaching. Above behaviour is the concept of competence or skills and knowledge. And in NLP we also talk about this level as strategy, meaning not just the kind of skills and knowledge you learn in training, but also all the things that you know how to do that are based in just your experience that is unconscious for you. So all the patterns and programming that you have that allow you to do things. Whenever you have some strategy or programming in your system, when that is fully in your system, behaviour emerges. So when someone wants a new behaviour, sometimes they're not able to yet do that because they haven't yet got the internal strategy, way of thinking, or the knowledge and know-how to be able to do that behaviour. Above the level of competence is beliefs and values, things we know to be true and things that are important to us. And these are above competence, behaviour and context because they are also more powerful than them. So things we know to be true about the world in general, about other people, as I said in the previous slide, create filters, as do our values. When something's important to us, we focus on it, we notice it. When something isn't important to us, we delete it. Hence, people that are interested in people, which often people that go on to work in things like coaching, will notice that someone looks upset. Whereas someone that's less interested in people, for whom people is a lower value, may delete that. So our beliefs and values are incredibly influential in creating our perceptual filters and our map. And they also massively influence what we're capable of doing as behaviours in a certain context. Beliefs that are particularly powerful are beliefs about who we are. So they're higher in the logical levels. And to give you an example of this, I know many coaches, students of coaching, understand that there are two things that you really need to learn to be a coach, and one is the actual skills of coaching, and the other is, if you're going to be self-employed, the skills of sales and marketing that are part of having a coaching business or commercial practice. So after doing their coaching training, many people also go on to do some kind of sales training, and in that training where they're seeking out competence in sales, they may even have a competency-based assessment where they're seen doing the behaviours of sales in the training. So it appears they've integrated what they need to be able to pass and say that they have sales skills. However, after doing this training, they may go out and discover that in the real context of prospects, of real clients, potential clients, that the sales behaviour just doesn't emerge. And when you look into this, it can be, and this is a common reason, that there is a belief that all sales is dishonest or manipulative. And at an identity level, coaches believe themselves to be caring of people and having a lot of integrity. So those things are core to the coaching identity for many coaches and can contradict this common belief that sales must be manipulative and lying fundamentally. So at the higher levels, of the logical levels, these beliefs form a kind of force against the know-how of selling emerging as a behaviour in context. And you can start to see how understanding this framework can be really useful for thinking about what's happening for someone and the behaviour that they want, why it doesn't already emerge easily. Is it because they don't know how to do it, or do they already know how to do it and it still doesn't emerge? In which case you're looking for something at a higher level that is a barrier to what they're looking to do. The last level is the most powerful. And originally, when this model was created, it was called the level of spirit. And later, it was talked about as vision and purpose as well. But one way to understand it is that beyond who we think we are, we have a connection, a sense of being connected to something bigger than ourselves, a meaning, a vision, or a purpose, or a sense of a spiritual, universe or God. So whatever that is for the person, we understand that this is bigger than even beliefs about who we are in terms of its influence in our system and as a resource of motivational energy. So whenever someone has done something extraordinary, they have always been connected to something beyond themselves. And this is a beautiful thing to surface and to help people connect with in coaching. Last of all, it's important to mention that we understand in NLP that the majority of communication between people occurs from one unconscious to another. So if you say this is the conscious side, this is what people say, or the content, below that is how people say it, how the non-verbals of their communication, the tone of their voice, not just the content of the words they actually say. And you'll probably know from your own experience that someone could say yes, but if they were to indicate with their head side to side no, that you would think that they probably mean no, because we weigh up the non-verbal communication as more meaningful or true than the verbal communication. And in NLP we say that the body speaks first, that the non-verbals is more like a direct communication from the unconscious, or in that Tim Galway model, the self-to, which has a much bigger connection to more information than the conscious mind. So one of the things that we have to learn in NLP is how to read and use information that comes through non-verbally, and not just have a sense of it unconsciously. So we need to become conscious of unconscious communication. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to some of the foundation concepts in NLP. The next lesson we'll be going into the NLP presuppositions, which will really distill some of the beliefs or assumptions of NLP.